If you're a buyer that's been sitting on the sideline hoping for things to change, I've got great news ahead for you in this week's housing market update that's coming up right here. Hey, thanks for joining me today. I'm Rick Harrison with MVP Realty in Southwest Florida, and on this channel, I bring you the latest news so you can make better decisions when it comes to buying, selling, and investing in Southwest Florida real estate. If you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell so you don't miss out on the latest data, tips, and news keeping you ahead of the market trends. Over the last 2 years, the country has been divided in a ton of different ways, but one of the quieter divisions has been in the housing market. For renters looking to buy, you had to choose between settling for a home you didn't necessarily want while simultaneously being forced to waive inspections, appraisals, and paying top dollar, or sit back, wait while your rent kept climbing, and hope the market would come back down and you wouldn't be priced out forever. For sellers, you had to decide whether to buy first and risk getting stuck with two homes or sell first and wind up with none. Well, I've got good news for everyone, and frankly, I think it's news that just about everyone can welcome and appreciate. Markets have shifted and they look to continue doing so. But before we get into the stories, let's dive into today's local market stats. All right, so I'm going to remove myself from the video here to go over. So we're going to start out with the southern part of Southwest Florida, and then we'll head into the northern part. Southern part is Cape Coral to Naples. So for Cape Corals to Naples, new listings went from 806 to 787. So that's actually down 3% week over week. But actually, the listings have gone up continuously. So this is just a week over week glance snapshot. Solds went from 629 to 806. So again, this is a lagging indicator, 30 to 45 days behind. So this is what has already happened in the market or was happening 30 to 45 days ago. That the solds is up 28%. So that means more people about a month ago, which is when we saw the rush come in because interest rates were starting to go up quite a bit. So we saw a rush, and that is when a bunch of people went to buy their properties. Pendings went from 803 to 827, so that is up 3%. Again, we have seen over the last week and a half, mortgage rates have come down, which has actually caused more people to go out and lock in their mortgage rates and take advantage of the rates while they've been coming down. A big kind of a surprising factor here, though, is the price decreases. I guess it's not that surprising because we haven't seen a trend. However, it went from 845 to 949. That is a huge increase, and that now sets a new record for the amount of price decreases week over week. So that is good news for buyers out there looking to get some deals and see the prices start to head back down. As far as inventory goes, single-family homes went from 4,886 last week to 4,936 this week. That's only up 50, but still it is a net gain. Condos, which is everything else other than single-family homes, went from 2113 to 2111. So we did lose actually two there. That is a typo. So the net gains went from 116 last week to only 49 this week. However, we're going to see that obviously we're starting to see more people buy again because the interest rates are going down. So that is going to be a trend for as long as the 2 and 10-year bonds probably continue to fall. Although the 2-year bond was up a little bit today. Multifamilies went from 179 to 179, so there's no change there. And then foreclosures, we lost 5 from 47 to 42. So again, not a huge increase in foreclosure activity in our specific area. However, across the nation, we're going to get into the story on that later. We are seeing a rise quite significantly. Northern part of Southwest Florida, Punta Gorda to Sarasota, new listings went from 2180 to 2145. So that is actually down 2%. Again, the same trend here. We are seeing more go off market because of the interest rates, mortgage rates. But again, net week over week, it was an increase in inventory. Price decreases and back on the market. So these numbers have been going up quite a bit. Price decreases 25.98 to 27.03. That's up 4% week over week, which is a big increase. So again, more homes are decreasing their prices regularly. Back on the market, which means these could have been homes that either went off temporarily less than 30 days or were under contract and have come back on the market. 491 last week, 573 this week. That is a pretty large gain as well, and good news for buyers. Sold 1651 to 2031, so that's up 23%. Again, that is a lagging indicator, and that would be indicative of what happened 30 to 45 days ago in this area. Pendings, however, are the leading indicator, and that is up 3% from 2068 to 2131. So that's indicating, and again, this is going to be the trend because mortgage rates are going back down right now. Inventory breakdown for the north part. Single families went from 3812 to 4016. That's a gain of 204 new listings for that area, which is awesome news because we've now seen 2 weeks where it is close to 200 new listings gained net. Condos, everything else, 1339 last week to 1406. That's up 67. So we had a net gain of 192 last week, a net gain of 271 this week. That's almost an additional 100 units. Multifamilies, last week to this week, no change again. And then foreclosures actually gained 2, but again, really not much of a change week over week in those stats either. Interest rates. So this is the good news for buyers. That's why we're seeing more buyers start to pile in again to the market. Went from 5.275 to 4.909. So now we're back below 5%. Again, about a month ago, we were close to 6%. And then bank rate has the average going from 5.65 to 5.28. So again, hovering right around the low 5% range for interest rates, which is awesome news. I'm sure all the buyers are starting to look at that as maybe we should get back into the market. The only thing really holding them back right now, again, would be the fact that prices have continued to rise steadily, albeit a lot more slowly than what we have been seeing over the last 2 years. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But we're going to get into these headline highlights that I had mentioned today. What's going on with the market shifts? This is national news. Some of it is localized, but most of it is national. And this is the trend and the sentiment that's going on in the housing market right now, and what's going to be indicative of what's going to happen to the housing market moving forward. So let's dive right into those stories, and we'll jump over to the web. So the first one is from the Florida Realtors Association. This is the market shift that we've been talking about for months now. It is starting to pick up speed, and I think it's starting to compound a bit. More buyers are canceling contracts. This is throughout residential real estate, not just necessarily new homes. We were talking about new builders. Lots of contracts are being canceled from new builds. We talked about that last time, but this is now also across the board. So more buyers are canceling their pending home contracts in South Florida, a sign that the market may be shifting away from the boom of 2 years ago. In June, 22.1% of pending sales, and let me move myself out of here. Home sales were canceled in West Palm Beach. 22% of pending sales were canceled in Fort Lauderdale, while 21.5% were canceled in Miami, according to Redfin. The national rate of pending sales cancellation is at 15%, so that is a pretty good clip as far as the number of cancellations that are happening at any one time. A few key factors. So these are the reasons and the sentiment again. Rising interest rates. So obviously week over week, that's not the case, but this is again a month over month comparison. Buyers no longer willing to waive the contingency part of their contracts and take the house as is, which has been because more inventory is coming on now, buyers have more choices. So they're not necessarily taking those losses and really settling. And buyers also becoming weary of the housing market in general, experts said. So lots and lots of people, it's now mainstream, are worried about what's going on in the housing market. We're still not getting, full support as far as what the contrarians have been saying as far as the market probably going into some kind of turmoil over the next few months. But we will continue to see that unfold. When a market shift is starting, sellers are still riding their highs and don't want to negotiate on price or terms. So if buyer asks for repairs to be done after the inspections, sellers may refuse and buyers may decide to cancel the contract and walk away from the deal, since there are more homes available now. So for you sellers out there, this is something to keep in mind. Buyers have more options now. So if you're trying to play hardball like you have been over the last 1.5 to 2 years, it might not work out in your favor. The other thing that I am seeing, and this is something you should talk to about your agent, whoever is representing you as a seller, there's different contracts. So The regular contract or the standard contract, usually, at least in Florida and in our parts, the standard contract is something that will actually lock in both buyer and seller. But there's a caveat. There are certain things that you will need to repair with a standard contract. So I have seen some agents, listing agents, starting to ask and require that the offers be made on standard contracts. So that really binds both the buyer and seller. It makes it difficult for them to get out of the contract. Whereas lots of times over the last 2 years, most of them have been asking for as is because they knew if a buyer decided to walk away, they had another buyer lined up. That is not always necessarily the case now. So that is something that you're going to want to consider, and definitely talk to your agent about what kind of contract should you be using, strategize, and use the one that is going to benefit you the most. Moving on to the next one, Redfin. There's an uptick in searches and tour highlights buyer's mortgage rate sensitivity. So this is really indicative of what's going on with buyer sentiment. The What we're seeing is the trends are really determined by what's going on with the mortgage rates more so than anything else. As mortgage rates go down, we're starting to see more people start to make purchases and pending sales go up. But as the rates go up, we start to see that demand fall again. So a half point drop in mortgage rates from their June high is drawing some home buyers back to the market. However, the uptick in early demand has not carried through to home purchase contracts or sales. So pending home sales are still down. Few homes are being listed, and inventory is piling up as homes take longer to sell. So we're seeing inventory increase, but we're also seeing the homes are taking longer to sell. Buyers are walking away from deals more now because they have more options. So a lot of this is starting to contribute to the fact that, while there might be an uptick in more people looking to buy, it's not necessarily translating into actual purchases. So the actual growth year over year has fallen to 9%, where I believe we were at 21 to 22% just a few months ago, and that was the prediction for the rest of the year into 2023. And Zillow and Redfin continue to reevaluate that and downgrade their projections. Next story, also rents. So this is a big factor for a lot of buyers. This could be something that plays out, not necessarily that it will, but could be an option that now that offices are starting to mandate their employees return to work, that could actually start to drive rental prices down. So if you are sitting on the sideline, you very well might be seeing rents start to level out and not seeing so many increases, and actually head the other way, according to this article. The relief likely will be minimal and slow, possibly as small as $40 a month. But you compound that over several months, and now you're looking at a couple $100, which is what we just saw for increases over the last year. Fort Myers could go from an annual 29% increase last month to a 14% hike in June 2023. So year over year, instead of it being up 29%, you might see it only up 14%. Tampa is expected to fall from 22% to 12%. And Orlando is expected to go from 22 to 16. Just to keep in mind, in a normal market, rents increase about 3 to 5% annually. And then 7 of the top 10 areas considered most overvalued for rentals or for rents in Florida, including number 2 ranked, which is Fort Myers, my area, which is 18% overvalued, and Sarasota Bradenton's, so this is the northern part of Southwest Florida, third place finish with rents 17% more than what the historical trends call for. So that would actually be 20 to 22% more. Same thing, Tampa, Lakeland, Orlando, Daytona Beach are also in the top 10. So we're looking at, again, 70% of the most overvalued rents are in Southwest Florida, and 30% are in Southwest Florida. I've talked quite a bit in the past about Michael Burry. He's been, obviously he's famous for his, the Big Short, the movie The Big Short. He's famous because he's one of the characters portrayed in that movie. For calling the 2008 housing crash way ahead of time. I think he was close to a year and a half to 2 years ahead of the market. Again, he started calling this back in 2020. So again, he was about 2 years ahead. But he is now starting to call out, and in this particular case, he's calling out Biden and the Fed, saying that they're being ignorant of history and what has happened, which we've talked about several times. Everything happens in cycles, whether it's history, it's economics, it's everything happens in cycles in life. There's actually a great book if you're interested. It's a classic, and it goes over the different cycles. It's called Cycles. You can still find it on Amazon. But according to this article, according to Barry tweeted, U.S. Fed, POTUS, Treasury do not know history and frighteningly could not see devastating inflation coming, even though people had been warning about this for quite some time, even as the pandemic just started. He drew parallels between Germany's path to hyperinflation in the 1920s and America's economic trajectory in the spring of 2021. As early as April 2020, so here's when he started to caution the U.S. Economy's reopening could supercharge demand and send prices skyward, which is exactly what happened. And then on the backside, retailers and manufacturers started to really price those things into their inventory, and they started actually buying ahead of inventory, which now has recently led to their overindulgence in inventory. Now that they had to bring prices down for a lot of those goods. So history is not useless. He hashtagged, and then he also started this week. The U.S. dollar is weaker than it appears because of its declining purchasing power. We all see it every single day in the prices of everything. That is why the prices of everything are going up. If you understand monetary policy or philosophy, money doesn't get cheaper. It gets deflated, and the purchasing power diminishes, but that is why things get more expensive. It's not because the money is getting weaker necessarily. It is because the money is getting weaker, but prices aren't just going up. It's the money is getting weaker, so it can't buy quite as much. So that is what inflation is. And then the final one that I wanted to touch on, there's a dramatic increase in foreclosures. So again, this is, we aren't seeing it necessarily in Southwest Florida, but this is a trend across the nation right now. It's up 150%, and a lot of people are still actually saying, this doesn't mean anything necessarily because we're still low on inventory. We're not back to pre-pandemic levels. However, the increases, it's all about compound. So if you understand compound interest, the fact that these have been going up 100%, 120%, 150% month over month, when you start compounding that, we will start to see more and more foreclosures come into market. It's up 219% since the start of the year. So trends really are very powerful, especially when they start to become a psychological factor where people are now starting to wait. And, that does start to play a factor into people who are thinking about, should I short sell my house? Should I go into foreclosure? What's my best options? So fully 96% of major metro areas saw an annual increase in foreclosure filings, with foreclosure rates highest in Illinois, New Jersey, and Ohio. We talked about those cities last week. And when it comes to the number of foreclosure starts, California topped the list, followed by Florida. Again, just keep in mind, those are obviously two of the larger states. So that would be, a big reason why we're in the top two. But again, you don't see Texas up here. So, which is a little bit more concerning because Texas is obviously a large area as well. While overall foreclosure activity is still running significantly below historical averages, the dramatic increase in foreclosure starts suggests that we may be back to normal levels by sometime in early 2023. So that's just a few months away. They are shooting up from extremely low levels, noting that even after the sharp increase in foreclosure activity observed in the first half of 2022, we're still not back to 2019's low pre-pandemic mid-year total. However, in 2020, we did see a huge drop-off in activity in housing because everything was shutting down. A lot of people were canceling their contracts as well. So what does this mean? Well, foreclosures remain unfortunate for the owners of those homes. For shoppers who have been frustrated by the lack of homes for sale in their budget, the increase in foreclosures could bring additional options. But much like the increase we see in for sale housing inventory, it's just the first step. We would need to see many more months of these increases before home shoppers will feel like they have an abundance of homes to choose from. And again, this goes back to, they're really downplaying this, but if you continue these trends, we're going to see that, like they said, by 2023, we'll see a dramatic increase in in inventory from this particular sector. That's not including all of the home builders who have stopped production. And there's a ton of, there's actually a lot of new homes that are partially completed and aren't being completed because the demand has been down so much. So again, that's going to be discounted inventory most likely in the future if things don't change for the builders. Well, that's it for this week. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button to let me know, and don't forget to check out the link in the description to get access to our MLS search engine and tons of free tools, resources, and hot lists. And if you ever want to connect or chat, my info is in the link as well. As always, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.